The large meeting room was silent as General Elizabeth Marshall walked in. She was the highest-ranking military officer from Earth, and today she would speak for all humans. The room was filled with aliens from the Ardaxian Empire, the rulers of most of the known universe. Their skin was pale blue and they stood much taller than humans with 4 arms and large eyes. Elizabeth took a deep breath. This was not going to be easy. The Ardaxians had found Earth just 3 months ago. They had been watching humans from afar, studying them. Now they wanted Earth to join their empire, but not as equals. They wanted humans to serve them. General Marshall, please state your case, said the lead alien council leader Vox. His voice was deep and came through a translator device that all humans wore. Elizabeth stood straight. The people of Earth thank you for this meeting. We wish to join the galactic community, but as partners, not as servants. Admiral Krathel, the military leader of the Ardaxians, laughed. He was covered in medals and scars from past wars. You have only one planet. We have thousands. You have just begun to travel in space. We have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. What makes you think you can be our equals? Elizabeth did not back down. We may be new to space travel, but humans have survived challenges that would destroy other species. We come from a world that is much harsher than yours. The aliens looked at each other and smiled, not believing her words. Your world is a simple one in a quiet part of space, said Krathel. Our scouts have reported that it is quite normal. Normal for us, Elizabeth replied. But what we call normal, you might call extreme. The council leader waved his hand, showing he was bored. Enough of this. Earth will join our empire and follow our rules. You will give us your resources, and some of your people will serve in our military. This is our offer. Take it or we will take your planet by force. Elizabeth felt her heart beat faster. This was the threat she had expected. The Ardaxians had conquered hundreds of worlds this way. They would come with their massive ships, show their power, and most planets would surrender without a fight. We need time to consider your offer, she said, trying to sound calm. You have 3 Earth days, said the council leader. Then we want your answer. As Elizabeth left the council chamber, she was joined by her team, Alan Carter, her strategic advisor, and Natalie Wright, who specialized in alien communications. They walked quickly down the long hallway of the Ardaxian space station. That went about as well as expected, said Alan, his voice low. They're going to attack, Natalie said. I could see it in their body language. They've already decided. Elizabeth nodded. They think we're weak because we're new to space. They don't understand what Earth is, or what humans are capable of. They entered their small meeting room. It was the only private space they had on the station. Earth's first starship, the Horizon, waited nearby, ready to take them home if needed. We need a new plan, Elizabeth said, looking at her team. Fighting them directly would be suicide. Their fleet is too big. Alan brought up a hologram showing the Ardaxian Empire. It was vast, spanning across multiple galaxies. Earth was just a tiny dot at the edge. We've studied their history, he said. The Ardaxians have conquered over 300 species. Not one has ever defeated them in open war. But, Natalie added, most of those species came from worlds much like the Ardaxian home planet. Calm, stable environments with mild gravity and gentle weather. Elizabeth smiled slightly. That's our advantage. Earth is what scientists call a death world. High gravity, extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, and radiation levels that would kill most Ardaxians in days. They don't know what they're dealing with, Alan said. Humans evolved on a planet that tries to kill us every day. So how do we use that? Natalie asked. Elizabeth thought for a moment. We need to make them understand who they're threatening. The Ardaxians respect strength and fear weakness. If they attack Earth thinking we're weak, they'll commit fully to the war. But if they understand what humans are really like, they might reconsider, Alan finished. Elizabeth nodded. I need to speak with the Emperor himself. According to their laws, a representative of a new species can request a direct meeting with the Emperor once, before joining the Empire. That's risky, Natalie warned. If you fail to impress him, we lose our last chance. I won't fail, Elizabeth said firmly. I'll show them what humans are, not just our technology or our weapons, but our spirit. What makes us different from every species they've ever conquered? They spent the next hours planning. They gathered stories and records from Earth's history, examples of human endurance and determination. They prepared carefully, knowing that the future of their planet depended on this one meeting. The next day, Elizabeth formally requested an audience with Emperor Drek VII. The Ardaxian officials were surprised, but they could not refuse without breaking their own ancient laws. The Emperor will see you tomorrow, the messenger told Elizabeth. But be warned, he rarely changes his mind once it is made up. That night, Elizabeth could not sleep. She looked out the window of her quarters at the stars, thinking about Earth. It was so far away, a small blue planet that had been humanity's only home for thousands of years. Now its fate rested on her shoulders. We will not be conquered, she whispered to herself. We will not serve, and we will not start a war we cannot win. She had one chance to show the Ardaxians the truth about humans. One chance to make them understand that Earth was different from any world they had ever encountered. One chance to save her planet. Morning came quickly. Elizabeth put on her formal uniform, the dark blue of Earth's united military. She pinned her medals to her chest, each one representing a mission, a battle, or a life saved. Ready? Alan asked as he and Natalie joined her. Elizabeth nodded. Let's go tell them about Earth. Together they walked toward the Emperor's chambers, ready to face the most powerful being in the known universe. Elizabeth considered her next words carefully. This conversation with Admiral Krathel might determine the fate of Earth. We could become allies, she suggested. Earth may be just one world, but our people have skills and perspectives that the Empire lacks. Krathel crossed his lower set of arms. The Empire does not have allies, we have subjects. Perhaps it's time for that to change, Elizabeth said. You've conquered hundreds of worlds, Admiral. Has that made the Empire stronger in every way? Of course, he replied, but she noted a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Are you sure? She pressed. From what I've observed, most species in the Empire evolved on similar worlds. They face similar challenges. They think in similar ways. She stepped closer. Humans are different. We see problems differently because our world forced us to adapt in ways yours never did. That kind of diversity can be valuable. Krathel was silent for a moment. You speak of an alliance, but what could Earth offer the Empire beyond the resources we could simply take? Innovation, Elizabeth said immediately. Humans excel at finding new solutions to old problems. We've had to, just to survive on Earth. She activated her personal data pad and showed him images of Earth's history. The first aircraft, early space missions, medical advances. In just a few hundred years, we went from horse-drawn carriages to spacecraft. From dying of simple infections to curing genetic diseases. We did this because we had to adapt quickly to survive. Krathel studied the images with interest. Your technological progress is indeed remarkable for such a short time span. And that's just our technology, Elizabeth continued. Earth has thousands of cultures, each with different ways of thinking, different approaches to solving problems. That diversity is our greatest strength. Krathel turned away, pacing the room slowly. The Emperor is considering your proposal. He has ruled for 300 years, longer than any emperor before him. In that time, he has seen the Empire grow, but also stagnate in some ways. Elizabeth felt a surge of hope at these words. Our scientific advances have slowed in recent centuries, the Admiral admitted. Many of our subject worlds provide resources, but few provide new ideas. He turned back to her. I have spent my life expanding the Empire through conquest. It is all I know. But perhaps there are other paths to strength. There are, Elizabeth assured him. Earth doesn't want to fight the Ardaxian Empire. We want to work with you, learn from you, and share what we know. Krathel was quiet for a long moment, then said, I have one more question for you, General Marshal. A personal one. Go ahead, Elizabeth said. The stories you told, of Captain Harris, of Kelly Rodriguez, of Lieutenant Foster, would you have done the same in their positions? Elizabeth didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Crathel asked. Why risk your life for others? Because that's who we are, Elizabeth said simply. On Earth, we learned long ago that we survive better together than alone. Sometimes that means sacrifice. Crathel nodded slowly. I will speak with the Emperor. That is all I can promise. Thank you, Admiral, Elizabeth said, sensing the meeting was over. As she turned to leave, Crathel added, General Marshal, regardless of the Emperor's decision, know that you have earned my respect. Few beings in the galaxy would have the courage to stand before the Imperial Court and speak as you did. Elizabeth nodded. Thank you, Admiral. That means a great deal. She returned to her quarters where Alan and Natalie waited anxiously. What happened? Alan asked as soon as she entered. I think, Elizabeth said carefully, that we may have found an ally. The next morning, they were summoned back to the throne room. It was even more crowded than before, with what seemed like every important official in the Empire present. The Emperor sat on his throne, looking serious but calm. Admiral Crathel stood beside him, his face unreadable. General Elizabeth, Marshal of Earth, the Emperor began formally. After careful consideration of your words and the evidence you have presented, I have reached a decision regarding Earth's place in relation to the Ardaxian Empire. The room was completely silent. Elizabeth stood tall, ready for whatever came next. For the first time in the 10,000-year history of our empire, the Emperor continued, we will not seek to conquer or subjugate a discovered world. Murmurs of surprise spread through the room. Elizabeth felt a wave of relief but kept her expression neutral. Instead, the Emperor said, we will establish a formal alliance with Earth as equals. Now the murmurs became louder. Some officials looked shocked, others outraged, but many seemed curious or even pleased. This decision was not made lightly, the Emperor explained to the assembly. General Marshal has shown us that Earth and its people are unlike any we have encountered before. Their world has shaped them into beings of remarkable resilience and determination. Such qualities deserve respect, not conquest. He gestured to Admiral Crathel. Even our most experienced military commander agrees that war with Earth would come at an unacceptable cost. Crathel stepped forward. I have reviewed all available data on Earth and its inhabitants. Based on this analysis, I now believe that humans would make more valuable allies than subjects. The Emperor nodded. So it shall be. Earth will be recognized as an independent ally of the Ardaxian Empire. We will establish trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense agreements. He looked directly at Elizabeth. Is this acceptable to you, General Marshal, as Earth's representative? Elizabeth bowed slightly. It is, Your Majesty. Earth welcomes this historic alliance. Then it is decided, the Emperor declared. Let it be recorded that on this day, Earth and the Ardaxian Empire have forged a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than dominance. As the formal meeting concluded, many Ardaxian officials approached Elizabeth, curious about Earth and humans. Some still looked doubtful, but most seemed genuinely interested. Admiral Crathel made his way through the crowd to reach her. It seems you have changed the course of Imperial history, General Marshal. We both have, Admiral, Elizabeth replied. This alliance will benefit both our peoples. I believe it will, he agreed. I have served the Empire for 5 centuries, always believing that strength came from conquest. Perhaps it is time I learned new ways to serve. It's never too late to adapt, Elizabeth said with a smile. That's another human trait. We're never too old to learn new things. Over the next few days, Elizabeth, Alan, and Natalie worked with Imperial officials to draft the formal alliance agreement. It covered everything from trade to cultural exchange to space travel regulations. Earth would retain its independence, while gaining access to the vast knowledge and resources of the Empire. In return, humans would share their unique perspectives, and help solve problems that had stumped Imperial scientists for generations. On the final day of negotiations, the Emperor held a formal ceremony to sign the alliance treaty. It was broadcast throughout the Empire, the first time many Ardaxians had ever seen humans. Today marks the beginning of a new era for the Ardaxian Empire, the Emperor declared. For 10,000 years, we have grown through conquest. Today, we grow through cooperation. He turned to Elizabeth. General Marshal, when you first came before us, you spoke of Earth as a death world that created a species unlike any other. I now understand that it was precisely these harsh conditions that made humans so remarkable. Your stories showed us not just your strength, but your spirit. Elizabeth nodded. Earth has shaped us, Your Majesty. It has made us who we are. We've learned to survive by working together, by adapting, by never giving up. Now we look forward to sharing those qualities with the Empire. After the ceremony, as they prepared to return to Earth with the signed treaty, Admiral Crathel approached Elizabeth one last time. I have been studying your world's history more carefully, he told her. Your people fought each other with atomic weapons and survived. You've endured plagues, asteroid impacts, and climate disasters. You've faced extinction multiple times and always found a way forward. He paused, then added, in all my centuries of service, I have never said this to any representative of another world. I'm glad we did not go to war with Earth. Elizabeth smiled. So am I, Admiral. War brings only destruction. This alliance offers us both a chance to build something better. As their ship departed the Imperial capital, Elizabeth stood at the viewport, watching the massive structure fade into the colorful clouds of the gas giant. Alan and Natalie joined her. We did it, Natalie said, still sounding slightly amazed. We actually convinced the Ardaxian Empire not to attack Earth. Not just that, Alan added. We got them to accept us as equals. No one has ever done that before. Elizabeth nodded. We showed them something they'd never seen. A species shaped by a world that tries to kill them every day. A people who don't know how to give up. She turned from the viewport to look at her friends. But we also showed them something else. That the same determination that makes us dangerous enemies can make us valuable friends. The ship accelerated toward Earth, carrying news of humanity's first alliance with an alien civilization. It would be a long journey, but Elizabeth didn't mind. They had achieved something that would change human history forever. That night, Elizabeth could not sleep. She stood by the window in her quarters, looking out at the swirling gases of the giant planet that hosted the Emperor's palace. The colors shifted constantly, deep purples, bright oranges, and electric blues. Do you think we got through to them? Natalie asked, joining her at the window. Elizabeth sighed. I don't know. The Emperor seemed interested, but Admiral Crathel is still pushing for war. He's been the Empire's military leader for decades. His reputation is built on conquest. Alan entered the room holding a data pad. I've been monitoring their communications as best I can. There's a lot of debate happening among the Imperial advisors. We've definitely stirred things up. Good, Elizabeth said. Doubt is our ally right now. If they're not certain they can easily conquer Earth, they might think twice about trying. The problem, Alan said, is that they still don't truly believe our stories. They think we're exaggerating. Elizabeth turned from the window. Then we need to show them something they can't dismiss, something that proves beyond doubt what humans are capable of. Like what? Natalie asked. Elizabeth thought for a moment. There's one more story I haven't told them yet. One that I was saving as a last resort. She walked to her personal bag and pulled out a small data chip. This contains the records of Lieutenant William Foster during the Resource Wars. Alan's eyes widened. The Battle of Kepler Pass, that's intense. Are you sure you want to show them that? I'm not sure we have a choice, Elizabeth said, her face grim. We need to make them understand what they'd be facing if they attack Earth. Morning came quickly. When they returned to the throne room, they found it even more crowded than before. Word had spread about the human representatives and their extraordinary claims. The Emperor sat on his throne, looking thoughtful. Admiral Crathel stood beside him, his face stern and doubtful. General Marshal, the Emperor said as they entered. "I have considered your words from yesterday. My scientific advisors confirm that your planet does indeed have conditions that would be challenging for our Daxian troops. However, Admiral Krathel points out that we would not need to send ground forces. Our fleet could simply orbit your world and demand surrender." Elizabeth nodded. "A reasonable strategy, Your Majesty. But before you make your final decision, I ask permission to share one more story." The Emperor gestured his approval. "Proceed," Elizabeth signaled to Alan, who inserted the data chip into their holographic projector. Above them appeared images of mountains, steep, rocky, and covered in snow. 20 years ago, Earth went through a period we call the Resource Wars. Elizabeth began. Nations fought over dwindling supplies of rare minerals and fuels. It was a dark time in our history. The hologram showed soldiers fighting in harsh mountain terrain. This is Kepler Pass, a narrow route through mountains in a region called Afghanistan. It was a critical supply route during the war. A force of over 500 soldiers was sent to capture it from the defending army. The hologram zoomed in to show a young man in a military uniform. He had a serious face with a small scar above his right eye. This is Lieutenant William Foster. He was 26 years old and commanded a squad of 12 soldiers who were stationed at the pass. Elizabeth paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. Lieutenant Foster's squad was supposed to be relieved by a larger force, but their replacements were delayed by a storm. The enemy attacked before they arrived. Foster's squad was alone against 500. Admiral Krathel let out a dismissive sound. Then they died. A pointless sacrifice. "No," Elizabeth said firmly. "They held the pass. For 3 days, their hologram changed to show the narrow mountain pass. It was the perfect defensive position, steep cliffs on both sides, with only a narrow path through the middle. But it was still just 12 against 500. On the first day, the enemy sent a small force, about 50 soldiers. Foster's squad used the terrain to their advantage. They had placed explosives at key points along the path. They triggered landslides. They held their position. The hologram showed the battle with small explosions along the mountainside, sending rocks tumbling down onto the attacking forces. On the second day, the enemy brought heavy weapons. They bombarded the pass for hours before attacking again. By this time, 3 of Foster's squad had been killed and 4 others were wounded. The hologram showed Foster treating the wounds of one of his soldiers even as explosions went off around them. Still, they held the pass. Foster moved his remaining soldiers constantly, making the enemy think they were facing a larger force. He used every trick, every advantage the terrain provided. The Emperor leaned forward, clearly interested despite himself. "What happened on the third day?" Elizabeth's face grew more serious. The enemy commander became desperate. He sent his entire remaining force, over 400 soldiers, in a massive attack. By this time, Foster was down to just 5 able fighters. And then this happened. The hologram showed Foster being hit by enemy fire. A bullet struck his leg. Another grazed his side. He fell behind a rock for cover. Medical scans later showed that he had lost nearly 40% of his blood volume, Elizabeth said quietly. For most species, this would mean certain death. For a human, it means you're running out of time. The hologram showed Foster tying a tourniquet around his leg, then injecting himself with something. He gave himself a stimulant and a clotting agent. Then he did something that shocked even his own people when we later reviewed the footage. The hologram showed Foster climbing to a higher position, dragging his injured leg. He set up at a point where he could see the entire pass below. He ordered his remaining squad to retreat with the wounded. He stayed behind alone. The Emperor's eyes widened slightly. 1 injured human against 400 soldiers? Yes, Elizabeth said. For the next 6 hours, Lieutenant Foster held the pass by himself. He had set up multiple weapons positions beforehand. He would fire from one location, then move to another, creating the illusion of multiple defenders. The hologram showed Foster moving from place to place, firing, setting off pre-placed explosives, causing confusion among the attacking forces. Eventually, he ran out of ammunition for his main weapon. By this time, he had lost so much blood that he couldn't stand. So he crawled. The images showed Foster dragging himself across the rocky ground, leaving a trail of blood. He reached a heavy weapon that had been left by one of his fallen squad members. Using the last of his strength, he triggered a final landslide that blocked the path completely. The hologram showed rocks tumbling down, filling the narrow path with debris. When our forces finally arrived 12 hours later, they found Foster unconscious but alive. Against all medical probability, he had survived. The hologram changed to show medical scans of Foster's body after the battle. The injuries were extensive: bullet wounds, broken bones, severe blood loss. The most important part of this story, Elizabeth said, is what happened next. Foster spent 2 months in a medical facility. Then he returned to duty. Admiral Krathel had been watching in silence. Now he stepped forward. If this account is accurate, and I still have my doubts, it shows impressive determination, but one exceptional warrior does not win a war. That's true, Elizabeth agreed. But Foster isn't exceptional among humans. His actions were extraordinary, yes. But his physical resilience, his refusal to surrender, his ability to function despite severe injury, these are traits common to all humans. She turned to address the entire assembly. This is what I've been trying to explain. Earth has shaped humans into survivors, into fighters who don't know how to give up. If the Ardaxian Empire brings war to Earth, you might eventually win through sheer numbers. But the cost would be unlike anything you've experienced in all your conquests. The throne room was silent. The Emperor studied Elizabeth with new eyes. I begin to understand, he said finally. Your species is indeed formidable in ways I had not considered. Admiral Krathel still looked unconvinced. These are impressive stories, General Marshal. But stories can be fabricated. Do you have proof that humans truly possess these extraordinary capabilities? Elizabeth smiled slightly. I was hoping you would ask that, Admiral. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small gravity device they had demonstrated the day before. Yesterday I showed you how Ardaxians struggle with Earth's gravity. Today I'd like to demonstrate something else. She handed the device to Natalie, who adjusted its settings. This field will now simulate the atmospheric composition of Earth, Elizabeth explained. I invite any volunteer to step inside and take a breath of what humans breathe every day. The Emperor nodded to one of his guards, who stepped forward cautiously. Elizabeth activated the field around the guard. He took a breath, then immediately began coughing violently. His skin changed color and he staggered. Elizabeth quickly deactivated the field. The guard collapsed to his knees, still coughing. Your atmosphere is poison, the guard gasped when he could finally speak. To you, yes, Elizabeth said. To us, it's life. We breathe oxygen, a highly reactive gas. The Emperor's palace was more massive than Elizabeth could have imagined. Built inside a gas giant's upper atmosphere, the structure floated on technology that humans were just beginning to understand. The walls were made of a clear crystal-like material that showed the swirling clouds outside. Giant pillars rose hundreds of feet high, and the floor was polished so perfectly that it reflected everything above it. Elizabeth, Alan, and Natalie were guided through long hallways by Ardaxian guards. The guards moved with perfect precision, their forearms holding ceremonial weapons. Each guard was at least 7 feet tall, towering over the humans. This place is designed to make visitors feel small, Alan whispered. Elizabeth nodded. That's the point. Everything about the Ardaxians is meant to show their power. They entered the main throne room. It was filled with hundreds of Ardaxian officials, military leaders, and noble families. They all turned to look at the humans, many with expressions of curiosity or contempt. At the far end of the room, sitting on a floating throne, was Emperor Drexus VII. He was older than most Ardaxians, with pale skin that was almost white. His forearms were decorated with golden bands, and he wore a crown that seemed to be made of pure energy, glowing and shifting in colors. Admiral Krathel stood near the throne, his face showing clear displeasure at the human's presence. Step forward, Earth representative, the Emperor said, his voice amplified throughout the room. Elizabeth walked ahead, stopping at the spot marked on the floor. She bowed slightly, showing respect but not submission. Emperor Drex 7, I thank you for granting this meeting, she said, her voice steady and strong. The Emperor studied her for a moment. Your request was unusual. Most species are honored to join our empire without question. Yet you seem reluctant. We value our independence, Elizabeth replied. Humans have fought hard for our freedom throughout our history. The Emperor waved one of his upper hands dismissively. Yes, Admiral Krathel has informed me of your claims about your planet and your people. You suggest that Earth is somehow special, different from the hundreds of worlds already under our protection. Earth is different, Elizabeth said, and humans are unlike any species you've encountered before. This caused a murmur of laughter throughout the room. The Ardaxians found her statement amusing. The Emperor leaned forward slightly. You control a single planet. Your space travel is primitive. Your weapons are basic. What possible threat could you pose to an empire that spans 12 galaxies? Elizabeth took a deep breath. This was the moment she had prepared for. Your Majesty, I do not come to threaten but to inform. Before you decide to bring war to Earth, you should understand what you would be facing. And what would that be? The Emperor asked, now looking slightly interested. Permission to tell a story, Elizabeth said, using a formal Ardaxian request that she had learned from Natalie. The Emperor raised his eyebrows in surprise. It was an ancient tradition in Ardaxian culture to request to tell a story during formal meetings. Few outsiders knew of this custom. Permission granted, he said, settling back in his throne. This should be entertaining. Elizabeth nodded to Alan, who activated a small holographic projector. Above them appeared images of Earth, its blue oceans, green and brown land masses, and swirling white clouds. Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago, Elizabeth began. It is larger and denser than most life-supporting planets in the galaxy. The gravity is nearly twice what Ardaxians are used to. The atmosphere contains oxygen, which is corrosive to many species but which we breathe to survive. The Emperor looked unimpressed. Many planets have harsh conditions. Life adapts. Yes, but Earth is extreme, Elizabeth continued. Our planet has active volcanoes, frequent earthquakes, violent storms, and temperature ranges that would kill most galactic species instantly. We have polar regions so cold that flesh freezes in seconds and deserts so hot that water evaporates almost immediately. Admiral Krathel stepped forward. Why are you telling us this? Do you think natural disasters will protect you from our fleet? Elizabeth smiled slightly. I'm telling you this because it explains humans. We evolved on a world that is constantly trying to kill us. Our bodies are built to endure conditions that would be lethal to most species in the galaxy. Our minds are developed to overcome impossible odds. It's who we are. The hologram changed to show a human city being rebuilt after a major earthquake. When disaster strikes, we rebuild. When faced with threats, we adapt. When challenged, we overcome. Elizabeth's voice grew stronger. This isn't just about our physical world. It's about what that world has made us. The Emperor leaned forward again, now genuinely curious. You claim your species is stronger because of these conditions? Not just stronger, Elizabeth said. More determined, more resilient, more unwilling to accept defeat. She turned to the entire assembly. You see, the Ardaxian Empire has conquered hundreds of worlds, but most of those species evolved on planets with stable conditions, mild climates, limited natural disasters, low gravity, weak radiation. The hologram shifted again, now showing a comparison of Earth's gravity, radiation levels, atmospheric composition, and other factors compared to the average galactic norm. Earth was an outlier in almost every category. Admiral Krathel scoffed. These are just numbers. They prove nothing. Then let me tell you about Steve Harris, Elizabeth said. The hologram changed to show a man in a spacesuit working on what appeared to be an ice-covered moon. Captain Steve Harris led a mining operation on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. 6 years ago, a structural failure trapped 12 workers beneath a kilometer of ice. The temperature was -200, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze air solid. The Emperor and many of the Ardaxians leaned forward, now fully engaged in the story. The rescue equipment was damaged in the collapse. The only way to restore power was to manually reset the emergency systems from outside the facility. Captain Harris put on a damaged suit and went outside. The hologram showed footage from the actual incident, recovered from emergency cameras. The suit could not fully protect him from the cold. As he worked, his skin began to freeze to the metal tools. 3 of his fingers froze solid and later had to be replaced. His face and lungs suffered severe damage from exposure. But he did not stop until the job was done. Elizabeth paused, looking directly at the Emperor. All 12 trapped workers survived, and Captain Harris, despite his injuries, returned to work just 4 months later. The throne room was completely silent. The Ardaxians looked shocked, some with expressions of disbelief. "This is not propaganda," Elizabeth said firmly. "This is documented fact. And the most important thing to understand is that Steve Harris is not considered an exceptional hero on Earth. His actions are what we expect of our people." The Emperor raised his hand, and the hologram disappeared. "An interesting tale, General Marshal. But one exceptional individual does not represent an entire species." Elizabeth looked at the Emperor steadily. "You're right. That's why I've come prepared with more stories. Many more. Because what you need to understand before you decide to wage war against Earth is exactly what kind of people you would be fighting." Admiral Krathel stepped forward angrily. "These are just stories. We have the largest fleet in the known universe. Your primitive weapons cannot match our technology." "Perhaps," Elizabeth agreed. "But technology isn't everything, Admiral. Sometimes, it's the spirit of the people that matters more." The Emperor raised his hand for silence. He studied Elizabeth carefully. "You have my attention, General Marshal. Tell me another story about these humans from Earth." Elizabeth nodded to Natalie, who prepared the next holographic presentation. The fate of Earth would depend on what happened in the next few hours. The hologram above them changed, now showing a woman with dark hair standing beside a crashed shuttle in a vast desert. "This is Kelly Rodriguez," Elizabeth said. She was a pilot transporting medical supplies when her shuttle crashed in the Atacama Desert on Earth. This desert is one of the driest places on our planet. Almost nothing grows there. Daytime temperatures can reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and at night they can drop below freezing. The Emperor watched with interest. "How long can your kind survive in such conditions?" "Without water, a human will die in about 3 days," Elizabeth answered. Kelly's water supplies were destroyed in the crash. The nearest settlement was over 100 miles away. Her communication equipment was damaged. Admiral Krathel crossed his lower arms. "So she died. This is not an impressive story." "No," Elizabeth said firmly. "She survived. For 30 days. Murmurs spread through the throne room. The Ardaxians looked at each other in disbelief. "Impossible," one of the scientific advisors said. "No intelligent species can survive that long without water." Kelly knew the desert, Elizabeth continued. She built a solar still using parts from her shuttle to collect moisture from the air. She stayed in shade during the day and walked at night when it was cooler. She ate insects and small plants that most people wouldn't recognize as food. When search teams finally found her, she had lost nearly 30% of her body weight, but she was alive and walking. The hologram showed medical scans of Kelly after her rescue. Her body was severely dehydrated, but she was conscious and able to speak. "Your records could be falsified," Admiral Krathel said dismissively. "They could be," Elizabeth agreed. "But they aren't, and Kelly's story isn't unique. Humans have survived in the harshest environments on our planet, frozen. Wastelands, burning deserts, deep oceans, and high mountains where the air is too thin to breathe properly." The Emperor leaned forward. "These are impressive feats of survival, General Marshal. But surviving is not the same as fighting. How does this relate to our current situation?" Elizabeth nodded to Alan, who changed the hologram again. Now it showed a city being rebuilt after some kind of disaster. This was Vancouver, a city on Earth's western coast. 20 years ago, it was destroyed by a massive earthquake. Over 50,000 people died. Buildings collapsed, fires spread, the water supply was contaminated. The images showed the devastation, then began to show the rebuilding process. What you're seeing is what happened next. Within 1 year, basic services were restored. Within 5 years, the city was completely rebuilt, stronger than before. Today, Vancouver is home to over 3 million people, and most visitors would never know what happened there. Elizabeth looked around the room. This is what humans do. We rebuild, we adapt, we overcome, not just as individuals, but as a society. The Emperor's scientific advisor stepped forward. General Marshal, I have studied your planet's history. Your people have indeed faced many challenges, but you have also faced many failures. You've had wars, plagues, and environmental disasters, caused by your own actions. Yes, Elizabeth admitted. We are not perfect. We have made terrible mistakes. But we have survived those mistakes. We have learned from them. And each time we have come back stronger. She gestured and the hologram changed again, showing a group of people in protective suits working in a damaged facility. This is from our history, nearly 100 years ago. A nuclear power plant called Chernobyl suffered a catastrophic failure. The area was flooded with radiation levels that would kill most species instantly. But humans went in to contain the damage, knowing they would die from radiation exposure. The Ardaxians watched in silence as the images showed people working directly in the radioactive zone. The workers shown here all died within weeks, Elizabeth said softly. They knew they would die, but they went anyway because their sacrifice saved millions of others. The Emperor raised his hand. Your people willingly sacrifice themselves for others? Yes, Elizabeth said. Not always, not everyone. But when needed, there are always those who will step forward. Admiral Crathel snorted. This is the behavior of a primitive species. No advanced civilization would waste lives this way. Elizabeth turned to face him directly. With respect, Admiral, this is not waste. This is the highest form of courage, to know the cost and pay it anyway. This willingness to sacrifice for others is what has allowed humans to survive on our Deathworld. The Emperor raised his hand again. I begin to understand your point, General Marshal. Your species has developed unusual resilience due to your planet's harsh conditions, but I still fail to see how this would help you against our fleet. Elizabeth nodded to Natalie, who adjusted the hologram. Now it showed military training exercises on Earth. Humans didn't just evolve to survive natural disasters, Elizabeth explained. We also evolved to fight. For most of our history, we fought each other, tribe against tribe, nation against nation. We became very, very good at warfare. She paused, watching the Emperor's reaction. Our weapons may be primitive compared to yours, our ships may be fewer. But Admiral, Emperor, honored guests, I must make this clear. Humans are the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy precisely because we evolved on a Deathworld. She gestured, and the hologram showed a comparison of human and Ardaxian physical capabilities. The average human can lift twice what an Ardaxian can lift. We can run faster and longer. Our bones are denser. Our muscles are stronger. Our immune systems fight off thousands of microscopic invaders every day that would kill most species. The Emperor's scientific advisor studied the data. These numbers, they can't be accurate. They are, Elizabeth said, and they don't tell the whole story. Because the most dangerous thing about humans isn't our physical strength. It's our determination. When we're cornered, when we're fighting for our homes, our families, our very existence, we don't stop. We don't surrender. She looked directly at the Emperor. Your armies have never faced an enemy like us. Your soldiers have never fought on a world like Earth. The gravity alone would exhaust them. The diseases would kill them. The temperatures would break them. And the humans would never stop fighting. The throne room was completely silent. The Emperor studied Elizabeth carefully. You paint a frightening picture, General Marshal, he said finally. But words are easy. Proof is harder. I agree, Elizabeth said, which is why I've brought proof. She nodded to Alan, who stepped forward with a small device. With your permission, Your Majesty, I would like to demonstrate something. The Emperor nodded, curious. Alan activated the device and a small field formed around him, Elizabeth and Natalie. This is a gravity simulator, Alan explained. It's now set to Earth's normal gravity level. He placed a small object on the floor outside the field and gestured to one of the Ardaxian guards. Would you please try to pick this up? The guard looked to the Emperor, who nodded. The guard stepped forward, reached down, and tried to lift the object. His face showed surprise as he struggled to pick it up. It's so heavy, he said, straining with all four arms. That's what everything feels like on Earth, Elizabeth explained. All day, every day, we're born in that gravity. We live in it, we fight in it. She stepped out of the field, picked up the object easily with one hand and placed it back down. Then she stepped back into the field. Now imagine, she said, fighting a war against people who consider this normal. People who have evolved to not just survive but thrive in conditions that would kill your soldiers in days. The Emperor leaned back in his throne, his expression thoughtful. You make a compelling case, General Marshal, but I wonder, if your species is so formidable, why have you not expanded beyond your single planet? Because we've been busy, Elizabeth replied. Busy rebuilding after our own wars. Busy fixing the damage we've done to our world. Busy learning how to live together peacefully. She paused, then added, and because we know that expansion without wisdom leads to destruction. We've seen it in our own history. We wanted to be ready before we moved out among the stars. The Emperor nodded slowly. A wise approach. But now, you have been found by the Empire, and you must make a choice. We want to join the galactic community, Elizabeth said, but as partners, not as servants. We have much to offer, our resilience, our creativity, our determination, but we will not surrender our freedom. The Emperor looked at Admiral Krathel, who was now watching Elizabeth with a mixture of disbelief and new respect. You have given us much to consider, General Marshal, the Emperor said. I will consult with my advisors. We will continue this discussion tomorrow. Elizabeth bowed slightly. Thank you for listening, Your Majesty. As they were escorted from the throne room, Alan whispered, Do you think it worked? Elizabeth kept her face neutral. I don't know, but I think we've made them pause. And that's a start. They returned to their quarters, knowing that tomorrow would determine the fate of Earth.